listen, they're 4-3, and they have not even come close to playing as good as they can play on offense. Defensively, they're awesome. And if they continue to run the ball like they ran the ball on Thursday night, if they can continue to do that, and they had a lot of wide open targets, and frankly, Bo just missed a bunch of them. I would look at them at some point saying, man, at the end of the season, they're going to compete for, a 9-8, 10-7 type season and could be competing at the end of the season for a playoff berth. And if that's the case, man, that would exceed pretty much everybody's expectations. And that would be awesome.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Broncos and Bourbon. I am your host, Phil Milani. Very excited about this week's episode as Mark Schlereth joins us. Very lucky to be able to track him down considering all he's doing these days, hosting a new show on FS1 every morning called Breakfast Ball. He's still on 104.3 The Fan here in Denver, and he's, of course, in the broadcast booth as a color analyst on game days. So very excited to be able to chat about this Broncos team with Mark Schlereth. And by the way, he doesn't think that it's very surprising that they're 4-3. He's high on this team, and we talk about where he sees the rest of the season playing out for the Broncos. Of course, we talk about Bo Nix. We get into some of the mechanical issues and why he's been a little bit off target, but Mark, not too concerned about that right now. So we'll get into that, and then we'll also talk Sean Payton. Some similarities, according to Mark, from Sean Payton and Mike Shanahan, Mark Schlereth's former coach. So a really exciting episode here. Mark is just sort of a natural storyteller, too. So you'll want to be able to hear some of the stories from his career. Really an unlikely career for Mark Schlereth. So many things had to go exactly right for Mark to be able to become a vet in this league, to play as long as he did, and to win 3 Super Bowls. Very interesting career and some great stories here from Mark Schlereth. And I will say our nightcap this week is Basil Hayden. So make sure you stick around for the bourbon review. But with that, let's get into this interview. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Here's Mark Schlereth. Mark, thanks so much for joining the program here. I'm glad I got a hold of you because I know how busy you are. What's been going on? Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, just, I moved to New York. I got this total whirlwind of kind of this opportunity that came my way. Like, I like to joke around. Fox has been approaching me for the last 2 years about doing a daily show. And it really just didn't make sense to move out of Colorado. We're so connected to our grandkids, and my son got a job out in Tampa Bay or in Tampa. And so they all moved. So it opened up the freedom of my schedule. And as I joke around all the time, I was like, I gave them a number and they said yes, which I wasn't expecting. So anyhow, here I am in New York, and now after 24 years of traveling, now my wife has to travel to come see me. But it's a cool opportunity. We're having a great time with it. So between doing Breakfast Ball and local radio, still doing that in Denver, Breakfast Ball on FS1 from 8 to 10 Eastern every morning. And then I'm still doing my local radio show. Only for me, it's been cut in half because I can only do half of it because Breakfast Ball's in, the beginning 2 hours of the show. And I'm still doing the podcast, the Think of Truth podcast, and then calling games on the weekend for Fox. So it is quite the schedule, but it's been great. The transition's been great. The cool thing for me right now is I've always been an analyst, and I signed this contract to be an analyst, and then I'm flying out to New York to start doing my first, pilot show. And they said, "Oh, by the way, you're hosting the show." And I'm like, "What are you talking? I'm not a host. What are you talking about?" So, for the last 6-8 weeks now, I've been hosting a daily morning show, and it's different. It's completely different. Certainly not something I was used to doing, and it's been an interesting challenge, to be sure, but it's been good. It's been fun, and it kind of creates a new opportunity, a new career path, if you will. Normally at my age, they're trying to kick you out of television, and so that was always something that we were going to have to deal with, the eventuality of that happening. But now all of a sudden I've started a brand new kind of career path. So, unless I really suck at it, it's going to extend my career. If I'm horrible, I'm not going to last that long.
No, I'm sure you'll be great. You call up Trey Wingo and get some tips from him?
Yeah, it's the interesting thing about it is this kind of this combination. I'm a combination analyst host. So the hard thing is kind of understanding where we're going, where we're trying to get to, and at the same time being completely immersed and involved in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And so there's a skill set that, frankly, I just don't or didn't have. Trying to listen to the conversation, try to interject in the conversation, keep the conversation moving. At the same time, listen in your ear to direction from your producer, where we got to get us out of this topic. Let's move to this. So yeah, it's really been interesting, and I'm kind of getting a little bit of a hang for how to really listen, how to really be interactive, how to really be involved in the conversation, and just trust that I'll be able to get us to wherever we need to go when the time is right, when the producer talks to you. But it's been, I was so nervous about it at first that I really wasn't listening to the conversation. I just want to be good at getting us where we need to go. And now it's just kind of like, whatever, we'll get there when we get there, and it'll be fine. And so, it's been a really fun. It's been a fun 2 months. It's been totally energizing, and the guys I work with are a lot of fun. So it's a great show. It's really been fun.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on all that success, and doing the stuff on the weekends too with Fox. That's just awesome to hear that. Mark, you did mention your son there. I know that he, pitched in the majors there for a while. Of course, this week LeBron is out on the court with his son. What do you think that would have been like? I know it's different sports, but what do you think that would have been like to be like in the locker room with your son?
Oh yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, it would have been great. Yeah, it just is like, I was able to talk about and show some highlights of my son pitching in his first ever game this morning on television. And, I've said this many, many times before, but I'll say it again, like looking at my own career and, being, a 12-year starter and being introduced as a starter in 3 Super Bowls. I consider that garbage compared to the exhilaration of watching my son trot out and throw his first inning in Major League Baseball. And, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was against the Atlanta Braves. It was the 6th inning, and it was 1, 2, 3, inning with a couple of strikeouts. So, it's a big time, it's a big time performance, maybe 1 strikeout, but anyhow, it doesn't matter. It was huge. And like the pride that you felt, the excitement that you felt, it was just way more exhilarating and way more emotional for me watching him do that and live out his childhood dream than it was for myself living out my childhood dream. So really, really cool moment. And that's exciting to watch, LeBron get that, whether you agree with, hey, Bronny shouldn't have been drafted or whatever your thoughts are on that. I can put those aside and just understand that feeling that LeBron must have having his son as a member of the Lakers with him. It's got to be just totally exhilarating.
Yeah, that was an awesome moment, seeing them check into the game at the same time. Must have been so cool. Okay, let's talk about this Broncos team a little bit here, sitting at 4-3. Is that surprising to you, Mark, that at this point in the season they have a winning record?
When they came out with 5.5, one of the first days of this new breakfast ball show, I was like, hammer that over. Like, hammer that. They're a better team than that. Now, I thought they'd be a little bit better and more efficient than they are on offense right now. And I didn't realize they'd be that damn good on defense. But listen, they're 4-3, and they have not even come close to playing as good as they can play on offense. Defensively, they're awesome. And if they continue to run the ball like they ran the ball on Thursday night against New Orleans, if they can continue to do that, and they had a lot of wide open targets, and frankly, Bo just missed a bunch of them. And part of as I went back and started breaking down a bunch of his tape and started really looking at him, it's endemic of college quarterbacks in general. When, all they've done is played shotgun football, And oftentimes in the college game, that first guy that you're reading your progression is open. And you're getting a lot of zone coverage. They're not changing a lot of things up because the pace with which you play. So you're always throwing it to the first dude. And so deadly accurate, really on time with the football. It's really when you get to that second and third read in your progression, when you have to start hitching up in the pocket and moving your feet. Like that's when there's almost a frenetic nature to his feet. And his feet aren't timing up necessarily with the routes because it becomes a little bit sped up, if you will. And I think, like I said, that's really endemic of a lot of young quarterbacks that you watch come out of the college game where everything's primarily gun and getting into the NFL game where you're still in gun, but now it's gun and you've got to tie your feet to this, the progressions. And then it's some, 20, 25 plays, maybe 35, 40% is under center. So it really becomes a very fine footwork situation. The West Coast offense, they always say you throw the ball with your feet. The timing of the offense is kept in the quarterback's feet. And it's something that Joel Klatt, who, we had on our radio show today on 104.3 The Fan, talked about. The timing of the offense is kept, it's held, the timing, the clock of the offense is held in the quarterback's feet. And that's what you see with young quarterbacks. So I think that that's going to get dramatically better as the season progresses. If they can continue to run the ball the way they've been running the ball, I think great things are about ready to happen for this Broncos team. So I'm very pleasantly surprised that they've won 4 games. But even that said, I expect them to play better. So, I would look at them at some point saying, man, at the end of the season, they're going to compete for, a 9-8, 10-7 type season and could be competing at the end of the season for a playoff berth. And if that's the case, man, that would exceed pretty much everybody's expectations. And that would be awesome.
Talking about Bo there, are those mechanical things because he's played so much college ball? Is that something that, okay, now it's going to be a lot harder to correct that, when he's looking at that second and third read? Or is that something that over time you expect him to kind of work through?
I would expect him. He's a smart dude. I would expect him to be able to work through those things. Again, it's just like anything else. It's an adjustment. And Shanahan, Mike used to tell, I had a deal with Mike where I interviewed him once. I was writing for ESPN, the magazine, and just asking him about, that progression for quarterbacks. And he was like, it really takes 2 years and, into your third season before you really, the offense just becomes second nature to you. It's just like you just understand it. You just feel it. And I always say, as a player, you never know what you like or what you don't like until you've gotten your ass whipped doing something. And you're like, now I know the pitfalls of that particular play. As you get advanced in football, there's certain things that I always think about, okay, I'm going to make this play, or they call a certain play. It's not only who do I have to block and, what's our assignment and versus certain fronts and, certain adjustments and certain looks. But the other thing I always thought about is, okay, where can I not get beat? So, where do I have late help? Where do I want to funnel a guy to? Where can I get beat in this particular protection or this particular run scheme? And where is it imperative that I don't get beat? Where do I not have any help? Like if I get beat early here, it ruins the play. If I get beat here, I've got bailout plans. And so the reason you do that is you always want to keep a guy where you want to keep a guy. I call it funneling players. I always want to funnel them to where it doesn't matter if they beat me because they're going to be away from the play side. They're going to be away from, the quarterback. They're going to there's going to be a running back releasing through that gap. I know he's coming over there late. So there's going to be traffic. There's going to be issues. And you don't really understand that or really know that until you've played for a while. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I know that on this particular protection, I've got B gap released by the tailback. So he may have to check something, but as soon as he checks it, bam, he's out the B gap. All right, well, I'm going to make sure I take an inside set and funnel my defensive tackle into that B gap area. And those are things you constantly think about as you kind of grow and as you continue to play.
Interesting. I like that. Talking about the offensive line here, the Broncos, they've only given up 9 sacks this season. They're tied for first in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
It's different than last year, Mark. I'll say that. Is that more like Bo, or you see a lot of improvement here with the O line?
Yeah, no. It's I think a lot of it is Bo. A lot of it is him climbing the pocket. Like, one thing he does really well, he really does a great job of, if that first read is covered, climbing up into the pocket. Mm-hmm. He's really good at that. Now, his feet are a little discombobulated, and one of the reasons he's been inaccurate in those things, but he does a great job with that stuff. So that, to me, is big time. And that, to me, alleviates some of that edge pressure that we saw a ton of sacks be given up last year, when a lot of them were credited the offensive line. That I would say probably 40% of the sacks given up last year were directly the quarterback's problem, the quarterback issue. And so he avoids a lot of those. And then he's so athletic, and he can scramble, and he can do all those things. So, like, those things are big time for an offensive line. So he bails them out of a lot of protection issues, to be sure. And then, they've been pretty good. They've fought pretty well. Like, they've been able to play pretty well up front in front of him. And then they do enough. And Sean Payton, the play caller, head coach, really good about running the ball, even when you're not having great success running it. Really continue to run it so that you can continue to use your screen game, your bubble screen game, your swing pass game. So where I can really be an aggressive offensive lineman, I can take some run block sets in pass pro. So, a lot of, like, being a great pass pro team, and Sean will tell you this, like, sacks are more a quarterback statistic than they are an offensive line statistic. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, if you give up a lot of sacks, one, your quarterback probably stinks at protecting himself and protecting the guys in front of him, holding the ball too long, escaping out the back of the pocket. There's a lot of things that go into that. So the game has changed in that it's so much 3-step, so much 5-step, so much screen, so much get the ball out of your hand in under 2 seconds, or 2 seconds. Like, a lot of that stuff that happens goes on the quarterback, in my opinion. So that's one thing. And then a lot of the sacks that are given up go on play callers as well. You got to give your offensive line the tools to be successful. And I always use this analogy, and I'll use it with you. You could say, hey, Phil, hey, Stink, I need you to build me a deck, and I'll get you all the lumber, okay? And I'm like, great, I've got a construction background. I can build you a deck. And then you're like, I've got all the lumber. It's the best lumber. It's straight, it's plumb. Everything is awesome. But here's the only thing you get to build that deck with. It's a hammer. Well, Phil, I'll build you a deck, but you better not stand on it, right? Because that thing's going to collapse. Like, I need a saw. I need a level. I need nails. I need brackets to break. Like, I need some other stuff than just the lumber and a hammer. And a play caller provides you with more than just a hammer. They provide you with a level. They provide you with a saw. They provide you with nails by the way they call plays, and by the way they give you an opportunity to change the aggressiveness of your set, to show up and run block on a 5-step drop, which normally you would never do, but you can because you understand the timing and the rhythm of the offense, because they've given you these opportunities to not only play past guys, but to aggressively run block guys in the play action game. And a great play caller understands your issues up front and does that for you. And that's one thing I will say about Sean. I've had many, many conversations with him about that and about taking the pressure off those guys up front, because ultimately they have those 5 together have the hardest job in football.
A little bit biased, I'm sure, huh?
No, not at all. There's zero bias there.
All right. You're talking about Sean. Does it seem like year 2, he sort of has his thumbprint on this team a little bit more? Like, just feels like maybe the culture has changed a little bit, or the mindset, the attitude that they play with?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I mean, obviously they're playing hard. They're an aggressive football team. They're trying every week to establish the run. There's no question about that. And the way they're playing defensively, like there's a great energy to this football team. There's a great culture that's being developed with this football team. And, I've said this for a long time because last year was somewhat of a debacle, and there's a lot of people out there. Oh, Sean, purposely sabotage Russ, and Sean is this and Sean is that. And, all that stuff. And I get it all the time on social media. All that stuff is just absolute garbage. Man, one thing I know about Sean, you think the players' egos are big? Walk upstairs to Sean's office if you want to see an ego. Like that guy is not purposely sabotaging anything, but he does know what wins, right? He is that guy that understands what he wants, what wins. And all I would point to is look at all the guys that were former players in New Orleans and how many of them wanted to come to an organization that's rebuilding. That ultimately is not in a Super Bowl, run because they don't have, the components to win a Super Bowl yet. They're trying to build those things, and because they play in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. And yet there's 5, 6, 7 guys that came from New Orleans and said, man, I want to play for Sean Payton. And it goes to show you, man, he's hard on guys. He coaches the snot out of you. He's hard. You think he's hard on the players, man. He's really super hard on his coaches. But there's an accountability factor there that's real. And guys really appreciate him. He does make it fun. He does, really, he's really a player's coach, believe it or not, even though he's hard on guys. And I remember one of the first things he did, I'd called Denver games, in my work with Fox, to where you're sitting down in the cafeteria, and we're off to the side in the, in this production meeting room, and we get our food stuff. And you walk down there, and there's all kinds of people down there from the offices, from the business offices, and everything else. And one of the first things he did is he came in and goes, no non-essential, no non-essentials are going to be in the cafeteria. Like, I want that to be a sanctuary for my players. And it's stuff like that players, it resonates with players. Like, because you're fine with, the business people and some suits from different corporations that are sponsoring. Like, I understand how the business part of it works, and it's great. But, you want to be able to walk in there in your underpants and grab yourself something to eat if you want to, and not have to be like, oh, let me get dressed. And what if there's a client in there? Like that, then all of a sudden it's no longer it's not my area anymore, right? It's public domain. And you want to keep it as much a sanctuary as possible. And Sean understands that about players, and players really respect stuff like that. That really resonates with players.
You can even tell some of that, like in the post game, in the victory speech where you see those pictures and it's all, they got the fog machine going and the guys seem like they've really got that camaraderie. Mark, do you see any similarities between Sean and Mike Shanahan? Like that same sort of like discipline and toughness, but guys really love the coach?
Absolutely. Yeah, tons of similarities. You love the accountability factor. And man, if you're not accountable and you're screwing things up, you don't get to play. It's a pretty simple recipe, right? I mean, and it's, for a player, like, you understand the meritocracy nature of playing in the National Football League, and you got to be good. It doesn't matter where you came from. You could be, a Quinn Miners as a Division III player, or you can be, a Patrick Surtain as a Alabama #1 draft choice guy. Like, if you can play, you get to play. And there's an accountability factor there that I appreciate. I appreciated that about Mike. Like, we're not going to have a bunch of guys who aren't professionals. And I always say, just because you play a pro sport doesn't make you a professional. And somebody has to be accountable. We all have to be accountable to one another. And if you're not accountable to me as your teammate, then you shouldn't get to play. And ultimately, that's not my job. That's the coach's job to put his foot down and say, we're not putting up with that. And so I appreciate that. Those are similarities that Sean has, that Mike had. They're demanding. They're hard. They're all those things, man. But they are player first coaches. And they expect a lot out of you, but they sacrifice a lot for you.
Yeah. Last one on this Broncos team here. They got the Panthers coming up on Sunday. I think they're 9.5-point favorites. Is there a little bit of a different mentality now for this team, like going into this week, where hey, you're not the underdog, you're not gonna catch guys off guard anymore, but now you're the favorite. You're expected to go and win and beat a Panthers team that only has one win. You're at home. How do you get the guys locked in to win that type of a game?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, man. Like they are, they're hearing it. They're hearing how bad they are. They're hearing, what a terrible franchise they are. They're hearing about, their quarterback situation. Andy Dalton and his family was in a little bit of a car wreck. I don't think it was serious, but still, like there's some stuff going on there. Bryce Young has just been a major disappointment. He's had to hear about that. So anytime it's like a wounded animal, you back a wounded animal into the corner, man, that's a dangerous, dangerous animal. And so, they're wounded right now, but they're professionals. They have pride. And anybody in the NFL can beat you if you don't take them seriously. The other thing is the Broncos have played much better on the road than they have at home. I mean, much better. So at this point, it's time to kind of whatever that is, whether that's, nervousness, whether that's distractions, whether that's, hey, we're trying too hard because we want to, the home fans haven't had a lot to cheer about, so we're trying to do more than our job. Whatever that is, you got to put the game together. They played the Raiders at home. They were about to go down 17-0 before the Pat Surtain interception that went the other way for 100. So, you got to put a game together, 4 quarters of football together at home to kind of shake that off, to get the monkey off your back about how poorly you've played at home. So I'd really like to see them come out and just put an entire game together and really dominate from start to finish. And the score doesn't matter as much to me as my eyeball test and what it actually looks like, and how efficient you are and how well you block things and how well you tackle and how well you play and, how many mistakes you limit and how many explosive plays you make. And of course, if you do that, you're probably going to score 40. But, those are the things that I really would like to see from this team that truly hasn't put it together on the road or at home, excuse me.
Yeah, and you don't want to overlook this team, knowing that, hey, the Ravens and the Chiefs are coming up here, that could be easy to do. So we'll have to see how locked in this Broncos team is. Okay, Mark, do some rapid fire stuff here with you. We call this Phil's Five. Mark, who is your favorite player growing up?
Oh, favorite player. Well, my team was the Pittsburgh Steelers, so my favorite player was probably Terry Bradshaw. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to take that back. I loved all the Steelers, but my favorite player growing up and the guy that I wanted to emulate more than anybody else, and I wore his number when I was in high school, number 52, and that was the Hall of Fame center, Mike Webster. He was my favorite player growing up, which does tell you how strange I actually am that my favorite player was an offensive lineman. That is, you think about it, and you're like, how stupid were you? Really dumb. But he was my favorite player. I love watching Mike Webster play. And, I love the Steelers. I could rattle off the whole team, but he was the guy that I kind of wanted to be.
You knew pretty quickly you were destined for an offensive lineman?
You know what? It's funny because I started playing. I was a quarterback when I started playing, and I was, not only one of the bigger kids on the team, but I was the most athletically gifted kid. So even as a young kid, I was the fastest kid on the team. I could out jump and out throw and out just pretty much everything. But I was also one of the bigger kids on the team, and from the first time I ever put my hand in the dirt in 3-point stance, I could just come off the ball and knock you off the ball. And I was never really taught. I just got in a stance and it all made sense. I had it right from day one. I don't ever remember even having to adjust my stance. Wow. Nobody really coached me on how to do it. It just made sense to me. And I could come off the ball and just knock people around. And so that was always a skill set I had. And so, the offensive line stuff actually was it came easy to me.
Awesome. Okay, who is your favorite teammate that you had during your pro career?
Wow, so many great teammates. But probably my favorite guy, because of just our relationship and the way we studied the game and were connected. There's two guys, both offensive linemen. In Washington, it was Mark Addix. He played 10 years of professional football. Then he went to Harvard Med School. He's an orthopedic surgeon in Houston. He's a dear friend. I'm the godfather to his 5 kids. He's the godfather to my 3. But yeah, he is such a salt of the earth guy. We were roommates in Washington, and we are forever connected and bound to the hip. My favorite guy in Denver was Dave Diaz-Infante, and Dave Diaz-Infante was my backup for 5 or 6 years in Denver, and we used to affectionately call him the stunt guard because Dave would practice for me all week, and then I would play on Sundays. And you just think about sports in general, like how beautiful that is, because normally that situation would create animosity and anger and vitriol between two people, right? Competing for the same thing. But we studied the game like we were playing it together. And like he had my back, I had his back. And it was interesting. In 1997, I left in November after a game against Kansas City where I played the game with no feeling in my feet. I had 2 herniated discs in my low back. And so I played that entire game. Like I said, both of my feet were completely numb. And so the next day I was flying out to LA, and I was on an operating table the following Tuesday. And 27 days later, I came back to practice and was doing my thing. I was going to start. And I went to Mike. I called Mike into Greek's office, Steve Antonopoulos, our trainer, said, I need to talk to you. And he said, yeah. And I go, listen, man, if you think, we're making this playoff push, this playoff run, and if you think Dave would be a better option than me going forward, being that I'm coming off this back injury, I said, I'll back him up. Like you're not going to hurt my feelings. Like I will back him up, and I'll be the best damn backup I can be to help him and to ultimately help us win a championship. To which Mike said, no, you're my starter. You're my guy. You're vital to our team, just from not only playing wise, but from a presence, in the huddle and everything else. And so anyhow, I came back to play, but Dave, like I would have gladly done that for Dave. And Dave, like I said, did that for me my entire time in Denver. And for me, it added years and years to my career. So I'm forever in debt to Dave Diaz-Infante. So those two guys, Mark Addix and Dave Diaz-Infante, are my favorite teammates of all time.
Wow. That is amazing. That is what made that team so special. You may have just answered this, but what's the best team you ever played on? I know that Washington team won the Super Bowl back-to-back in Denver. Best team you ever played on?
Yeah, it's so hard because that 98 team, we went 13-0 with that 98 team, and we just ran roughshod through teams. But you go back to that 91 team in Washington, the only team, it's still considered the best Super Bowl team in history. It's the only team in the history of the Super Bowl that had a top 5 offense, a top 5 defense, and a top 5 special teams. Mm. And you think about what we did, just in the playoffs alone. Like we beat the Detroit Lions like 45-10 in the playoffs in the divisional round. Or first off, we beat Atlanta in the divisional round like 24-7 in just a sheeting rainstorm. And then the next week we beat Detroit like 45-10. And then we win the Super Bowl 37-24 against Buffalo. But we gave them a couple fourth quarter courtesy touchdowns. Like that game wasn't even close. And so it's probably the most, and that team started off at 11-0. So it's probably the most dominant team in the Super Bowl era. Like those two teams for me are neck and neck. But if I had to give the nod to one team, I'd probably give it to Washington having a top 5 offense, top 5 defense, and top 5 special teams.
Yeah, that's amazing. Who's the best player you ever faced?
Probably Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah.
He was frightening, just absolutely frightening. And he rewrote what an edge defensive end / outside linebacker. Like we're still trying to find Lawrence Taylor types in the NFL today. Like he completely turned the league on its head, and athletically gifted, physically gifted, psychologically just mean as a snake. That dude was frightening to play against, and just the best player. I mean, and I played at a time that had Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor and Warren Sapp and John Randall and, Cortez Kennedy. And it was a cavalcade of, front seven, Junior Seau, just front seven guys that were, Hall of Famers, like littered. The whole league was littered at that time. So some of the best players in the history of the league, Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White, were two of the best players that ever played this game.
Yeah, no, that was an awesome time with football. I mean, that's I grew up through that time, so like I have a nostalgia for that. But the guys you mentioned there, I mean, it's hard to top that. Okay, and then the best lesson you ever learned from a coach.
Wow. There are so many. There are just so many football lessons. Just overall football lessons that you learn. And I don't know if these are necessarily from coaches or just football in general lessons, but the life lesson of sacrifice, of that we're better together than we are individually. And just the lesson of sacrificing. And I always tell the story, and I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. Marvin Washington was a teammate of mine in college, University of Idaho. And I was hurt my whole college career. And as a matter of fact, I was retired from football as a junior in college. It's done. And they weren't going to let me play anymore. And I begged them and pleaded with them and just begged them to let me play my senior year. And ended up playing my senior year only after I signed papers to limit their liability toward me as an injury risk, right? Wow. So that they weren't going to get sued.
What was your injury?
I had 6 knee surgeries, I had elbow surgery, I had all kinds of things. So anyhow, so I signed this paper, and then I switched from the defensive side back to the offensive side of the football, which I hadn't played since I came in as a freshman. So this is my redshirt senior year. I played 1 year of college football where I'm actually healthy. Started all year at guard. Had no agent, no interest, no nothing. And one night, Marvin Washington calls me up and says, "Hey, man, the Bengals are going to be working me out at the Kibbe Dome in Idaho tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. Just crash my workout." So I crashed Marvin's workout, begged the scouts to work me out, told them who I was. They let me work out. I absolutely crushed Marvin in every aspect of the workout, from lifting to running to jumping and he's 6'6", like 265 defensive end. Like the dude was chiseled from a piece of granite. And I crushed him. He was a basketball player. And I crushed him in everything. And sure enough, 2 days later, my phone rings. It's Marvin. "Hey, the Jets are coming today. Show up to my workout." And 2 days later after that, it was another team, and then another team, and then another team. And he kept inviting me to these workouts, and I kept crushing him in every workout. And I always joke with Marvin to this day, I probably cost you, he was supposed to be a second or third rounder. He got drafted in the 6th round. I go, "It cost you at least like 4 to, like, I cost you somewhere between 4 and 3 rounds in the draft. Somewhere in there I cost you." But he just kept inviting me. And then eventually I got on enough people's radar that they started calling me and started coming out to work me out individually. And so I don't play it down in the NFL if it's not for my teammate making that sacrifice, Marvin Washington. And then the flip side, or the continuation of the story, is after we won the Super Bowl in 1997, Super Bowl 32 against the Green Bay Packers, Shanahan comes down to the training room where I'm laying around with ice on, doing whatever rehab I'm doing. This is in the off season. And Mike says, hey, man, I need a defensive lineman. It's a swing guy, defensive end, defensive tackle. He goes, I don't really care if it's the best player. I just want the best guy, the guy that fits our team the best. And he gives me a sheet of paper with about 7 names on it. And one of the names is Marvin Washington. He says, who should I sign? I go, sign him. He fits us. Mike, to Mike's credit, goes, done. Leaves the training room, walks upstairs, gets on the phone with his agent, and gets him signed. And so Marvin and I win a Super Bowl together in 1998. So I don't play it down in the National Football League if it's not for Marvin Washington. And Marvin Washington doesn't have a ring if it's not for me. And it's just the sacrifice that you make for one another to be great.
Wow, that is an amazing story, Mark. I mean, yeah, it just sounds like that's a common theme there, that it takes a whole village to make an NFL career and just to get you to where you're at. It's that's an amazing story.
No question about it. Just it's awesome. It's something we share and something we goof around with each other on and bust each other's chops about, you're lucky I invited you to my workouts. And I'm like, you don't have that ring if it's not for, it's what guys do. Right. So, but yeah, that bond and that connection is incredible.
That's amazing. Okay, last one for you, and then I will say goodbye here. I like to ask everybody who comes on some career advice, and maybe there's nobody better than you, Mark, just considering all the success you've had. You're green chili, you're an entrepreneur. What's some career advice you would give to a guy who maybe this is their first fall away from the game, or maybe, hey, they're thinking, this might be my last season, I'm heading into retirement, I don't know what I'm going to do. What's some advice for that kind of a guy?
It's an adventure, man. It's an adventure. And like, there are so many things that you look back on. And, I got into the league as a 10th rounder out of the University of Idaho, and I made a deal with myself. I actually looked at myself in a mirror and had this conversation with myself in the mirror. If you don't make it in the National Football League as a player, it's because you're not good enough. Effort is not going to be an issue. Study habits are not going to be an issue. Work is not going to be an issue. The only way you don't make it is you're not good enough. And I go, you can live with that. But talking yourself out of it, or not giving great effort, or being nervous, or being scared, or whatever, don't let that be the thing that derails you from playing and living out your childhood dreams. And I would say the same thing in any walk of life I've gone in. Like, I'm a dyslexic kid from Alaska who didn't learn to read in the 7th grade. And now I'm doing something that gives me great anxiety. I'm reading scripts in front of a live national audience on television every morning. If you would have told me that even 10 years ago, I'd have said, you're crazy. Like, I will never read anything out loud. And it does. It gives me total and complete anxiety every single day when I think about it. And you know what? So what? Yeah. You know what? I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to do the best that I can do in all those situations. And it's become something now that, like, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, what do you want me? Oh, you want me to look at this? Okay, whatever. And the bottom line, if you screw it up, you move on, it goes into the ethos, and you never talk about it again. So it's one of those things that you got to conquer your fears. And yeah, man, every one of us has those fears, but I just don't let them stop me from doing what I want to do. And, I don't live that way. There's an old line in a song by the Psychedelic Furs. I think it's Love My Way. And I'm a big 80s guy. I love 80s alternative music. So the Furs were a big 80s alternative rock band. And the line says this: you can never win or lose if you don't run the race. I'm running the race.
Yeah.
And I'm going to find out if I'm good enough or I'm not good enough. And I can live with not being good enough. But damn it, I'm going to run. And I'm going to run hard, and I'm going to try to beat your ass. But Like that's just the way I'm going to do it. And that's what I would tell you. Just run hard, man. See where you stack up.
Oh, I love it. That vulnerability, like that makes you special too. Like that comes across, and you, as a viewer, at least for me, when I watch
Yeah.
you, I'm like, I appreciate that. Like I like what it's honest, it's real. Like,
Yeah.
and so you appreciate that. So
Appreciate that.
awesome.
Thank you, Phil.
Hey, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate your time, and I know that you're so busy, and I'm so happy that you've got all this success with Breakfast Ball, Fox. I mean, I could go on, and I just it's an honor to have you on here, so I really appreciate you.
It's my pleasure, buddy. Take care, man, and we'll talk soon.
My thanks to Mark Schlereth for coming on there, and really enjoyed some of those stories he was telling. I mean, the teammates that he had over the course of his playing career, those are just some incredible stories, and really enjoyed hearing that from Mark there. And I enjoy his takes on the Broncos here. I mean, really a smart football guy. He does his homework, studies the film here, and so when he talks about Bo Nix and this offensive line and what he's seen from Sean Payton, I believe what he's saying there, and I think that this is going to be an interesting game on Sunday, just in terms of what do you see from the Broncos here? Do they just come out, take care of business, and say wham bam, thank you ma'am, or is this going to be a game that's closer than it's supposed to be for a while? Maybe the offense doesn't get going. We've seen that happen, and then maybe there's some pressure there in the fourth quarter to win. You don't want to see that if you're the Broncos. You want to see a thorough performance here where they just come out, take care of business, and do what they're supposed to do. And it can be easy to overlook this Carolina team, but they got a good running back. Josie Jewell's return here to Denver, so you don't want to take this team lightly and overlook them and start thinking about that Ravens game and the Chiefs, and that you're 4-3 and you're feeling confident, and you had this little mini bye, and I think that things could spiral there if you let it. So it's going to be upon the vets in that locker room. It's going to be on Sean Payton to make sure that this team comes out and plays the way they're supposed to, because on paper this thing shouldn't be close. And I'd like to see the Broncos get that running game going again. Let Bo use his legs a little bit, and then let's see him drive the ball down the field. Let's see him do the things he's supposed to do. And on defense, hey, PS2 is back. Let's get this thing rolling and make sure that you don't miss any beats there. So looking forward to see the Broncos come out and play some of their best ball of the entire season this Sunday when the Panthers come to town. Our nightcap this week is Basil Hayden from the Jim Beam Distillery. Very nice bottle here. This has got to be one of my favorite bottles. There's a little emblem here, a BH logo. It looks like a single malt. It looks like it's a very fancy bourbon. This one a little more expensive than some of the other bourbons I've sampled. I think I picked this up for just under $40, so just a little bit higher, but really a nice bottle, and it's got this sort of light color here. So it really does look like a single malt. It's like a light gold here. Let me get into the mash bill here. 63% corn, 27% rye, and 10% malted barley. So this is a 80 proof bourbon. So on the lower end, it's really low actually for a bourbon, but it's got a little bit more rye than you would expect. So let's get into this here. I'll pop the bottle and pour this. Gonna drink this one neat just because it's at the 80%. I think that it's not gonna have that burn, that's for sure. So I know a lot of people who really enjoy Basil Hayden though. So I think that this is a bourbon that many people out there have in their home bar. So let's get a smell here. It's a sort of an interesting smell, a little bit of peach, maybe like a little bit of orange. A little bit of maybe like berry, perhaps. An interesting nose for sure, I would say. You're usually getting that sort of that oakiness and maybe some more of that rugged bourbon smells, but this one much lighter. So let's get in. You can tell that this is just 80 proof. I mean, it's a little bit thin. I'll say that. It's very easy drinking, though. Little bit thin, a little bit of peach, a little bit of vanilla that comes through, especially from the nose there. But there's really no finish, just because at 80 proof there, you're just not really going to get a ton of that. But the peach comes through, which is nice, and it's light. So maybe if that's your thing and you're just sort of like, hey, I don't need all this. I don't need to cough up a ton and like feel like I'm drinking something crazy. And maybe you like to have a few bourbons. Then maybe this 80 proof is something that you'll enjoy. And it's light and maybe it's easy drinking. So definitely a good bottle. Maybe you're trying to get into bourbon. Maybe you're trying to get a gift for somebody who's not really a big bourbon drinker, but you think maybe they'd like it, like to try it. This is a good one just because it is easy drinking, easy to sip there, and it's sort of a unique bourbon in that peach comes through, and the rye, it doesn't hit you over the face. It doesn't sort of have that burny taste there. So like a spice, it's not that, it doesn't have that spice. So an enjoyable bottle here. I like this. I like the look of the bottle. The marketing is tremendous on this, and it makes you feel like you're drinking something really fancy here. So small batch, it says on the bottle here, and from the Jim Beam Distillery. So definitely worth trying here. But if you're looking for something that's going to pack a little bit more punch, maybe this isn't for you. So that's what I'll have to say about Basil Hayden. That's our bourbon review. Where does it stack up? Maybe I would say I'd put this. I'm still thinking Four Roses is my top one that I've tried so far. And then I'd put this behind Knob Creek. I definitely enjoyed Knob Creek. And maybe behind Old Granddad 114. I've enjoyed that the more I've drank it. So I'd put this right in the middle of the pack from what I've tasted so far. So hopefully you enjoyed that. And like I mentioned, I have not gotten paid to review these. I just picked this bottle out and thought maybe you'd enjoy hearing what I had to say about it. So once again, my thanks to Mark Schlereth. Really appreciate him coming on the show this week. That's going to do it for us. I think that I'm excited to see what this Broncos team does this week, because if you can improve to 5-3 heading into that Ravens game and knowing that the Chiefs are right there, at 5-3, you got to be feeling pretty confident, and you should be definitely in the mix here coming down the stretch, which is very exciting. All right, that's going to do it for us. I am Phil Milani. You've been watching Broncos and Bourbon.